going to take a different approach perhaps than some of the other speakers. I have a lot of material here for you tonight, including some videos. So I'll let, at the right moments, I'll let some images come to you of Abu Dhabi by way of our videos. I'm the director of the Capital District Development and also of the Emirati Housing Program for Abu Dhabi. But I'm going to talk to you about the whole vision for Abu Dhabi, and then I'm going to give you some more insight into those two programs in particular. What I'll move through tonight is the Urban Planning Council and Vision 2030, which is based on Economic Vision 2030 and then Plan 2030, which I'll also talk about. I'll move through how the UPC does master planning in Abu Dhabi. I'll move into the Capital District as one of those master plans. We'll talk about urban revitalization, which you wouldn't think of probably for a city that's less than 30 years old, but we are undertaking a very aggressive program of urban revitalization in our North Island of the existing city. Neighborhood planning, which is a big focus for us and has been for the past year. I'll talk about the many guidelines that the council has brought into play, just building on the concept that when the council was formed in 2007, it was a disparate collection of departments and agencies that had different authorities and powers in Abu Dhabi, and all of the planning powers were vested under the council. And one of our big roles has been to create a whole new policy framework for government, and I'll just talk about some of those tonight. I'll give you insight into the Emirati Housing Program, and I'll close with my favorite, which is Abu Dhabi's Estidama program, which is the Arabic word for sustainability. So that was, I hope, a good way to start the presentation. How many of you have been to Abu Dhabi? And how many of you are about to go next 2 weeks? Very good. Hopefully you get to see some of the places in that video, and also some of the people. Most of those people in the video are my colleagues and friends, and I work with them every day, so it's great to see them in the video. Vision 2030, of course, came from the President, His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and in 2007 he mandated that the Abu Dhabi Urban Planning Council design and implement a strategic planning initiative to guide the evolution of Abu Dhabi as a global capital city. That's pretty much it. That's the wording he gave us, and we went from that to form the Urban Planning Council that same year, which is chaired by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi. He's also the chairman of the Abu Dhabi Executive Council, which controls all of the government decisions for Abu Dhabi. That's funding decisions, program decisions, services. The UPC, in simple terms, is the physical planning, is responsible for the physical planning of the Abu Dhabi Emirate, not just the city or the region, but the entire Emirate. We're the agency responsible for pursuing sustainability, infrastructure capacity, community planning, and doing that through the creation of plans, regulations, and development review, all of which was new in 2007 to the government. And we're also, of course, the authority behind Plan 2030. Before the Urban Planning Council was formed, planning and other functions were broken into different parts of different departments. For example, the municipalities would have planners on their staff and plan checkers, but nobody was keeping an eye on the big picture, and that was one of the big drivers for forming the UPC and also for Plan 2030. If you look back in time, the drivers and the origins of Vision 2030 would have come out of 2005, 2006. And at that time, there was no end in sight to the optimism, I think, on the planet, but certainly in the region as well. And there was a lot of rapid growth, which Abu Dhabians were seeing in Dubai. And at that time, Dubai was at the height of it, of the expansion and the development. So that's the backdrop for the President forming the Abu Dhabi Planning Council. The other thing it had going for it at that time was a healthy economy, and most importantly, political stability in the region. Abu Dhabi and the UAE in a larger sense really, and even more so today with the events happening, is a very, very stable element in the region. And also the President and the Crown Prince's commitment to strong and sound planning, and also a drive towards sustainability. And that the Arabic word Estidama wasn't really in common use prior to the adoption of the Estidama program, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about today. I'm going to give you some milestones that are set in Plan 2030. In 2008, just under 1 million residents in Abu Dhabi. I'm going to show you 4 milestones culminating in 2030. These population figures have been stepped down now in the last 18 months based on our market and industry assessments. So these are the revised figures. Rising through 2013, approximately 1.2 million, 2020, 1 3/4, and then the target of in 2030 of 2.58 million. And that, of course, has moved down. I expect next year it will also be adjusted again. The important thing to remember about Plan 2030 is it's not a population estimator, it's a master plan. It sets the template for growth, and the growth itself is paced by development and investment and what the market is doing. So we can adjust these population figures, but Plan 2030 remains unchanged. It's really the template for growth that the investors and the developers and government will follow. Yeah, very simply, Vision 2030 is built on 2 foundation pieces of policy. Plan Abu Dhabi 2030, which is the land use policy control side, and Economic Vision 2030, which is the economic side. And those two go hand in hand, and the policies are quite well integrated and woven together. For Economic Vision 2030, which was one of the drivers and the origins behind the plan, is to prepare a guide map for the Emirates' economic development and diversification. Again, looking to a number of places, but the sister city of Dubai, and learning about diversification and about changing while you have the opportunity to change. Building a sustainable economy, again, learning from lessons elsewhere where the economies aren't sustainable and aren't robust enough to manage through tough times. And also to ensure a balanced social and regional economic development approach that brings benefits to all. And this is also important in an oil-driven economy to make sure that social benefits are taken into account. In a decade, I don't know where else in the world you're going to see numbers like this. In the last 10 years, the GDP has risen 238%. The per capita income has risen almost 100%. The population has grown 73%. Foreign trade has increased 257%. And investment in Abu Dhabi has increased 433%. At the same time, the oil share of the GDP rose only 2%. And one of the big drivers in Economic Vision 2030 is to bring that oil share down and switch that around. And this is how it would look, which is shifting from 60% oil-dependent GDP and 40% non-oil completely around by 2030. So it's 40% oil and 60% non-oil. And we're actually ahead of it because right now we're at 50-50 roughly. So we're already sitting where the economists thought we were in 2014. So Abu Dhabi is really making this happen, and it's through education institutions, knowledge-based technology, and a number of other strategic investments like Etihad Rail, expansion of the airport, and these types of initiatives. Economic competitiveness in the region, Abu Dhabi ranks very high, which is, of course, a major consideration for investors. And one of the reasons it ranks so high is because the government's investment in development of policies and infrastructure and institutions to support that real estate investment, and also more directly, the direct support of the real estate sector. And this is what would differentiate it not just from Dubai, but in fact, Abu Dhabi does support us, local developers, real estate companies, and has also supported in the past 2 years Dubai with cash assistance in their failing market. The role of the UPC, the planning is based on knowledge and information, not just what you might want to happen. And so one of our big roles is looking at real estate and development and forecasting the supply and demand. And this has been huge. In Abu Dhabi, prior to 2007, there was no general handle or assessment on what was in the pipeline for developments. And again, in Dubai, it was the same situation. So nobody knew how much was coming on stream, and nobody knew, even more importantly, how many people were coming on stream to buy the product. So one of the big roles that the UBC has played for Abu Dhabi is gathering that intelligence, and we do that in a number of ways. We have models that we use to forecast. We try to ensure that the level of supply is in line with potential market demand. This wasn't possible before because the government didn't have the systemic ability to put a freeze or a pause on development projects. It was very one-off. The UPC can forecast entire districts where we ought not to start development and where projects ought not to get approval, even though the developer would want to have that approval in place. We produce a real estate demand and supply model in conjunction with our colleagues at the Department of Economic Development. And we use our policies and our approval authority to control what the market is delivering. It's not a perfect model. We're still going through an evolution with government as government gets used to saying no to developers. Most of the development companies in Abu Dhabi are linked to the royal family or people in positions of leadership. And there hasn't been a culture of saying no before on the development side. And I think this is typical of the area. The next thing that we do is to then assess any project that comes forward with respect to their projected materialization rates on a detailed basis. In other words, developers prior to us would never admit to when they were really going to have their products online. They would produce their sales machines and get them out and say that these things are all coming in a certain time to build hype. But the reality of when these products were coming online is very different than that. So we actually look at the financials of the companies, and we can figure out pretty readily when they're really going to be delivering this product. This is probably one of the most important slides. It's a terrible slide, but the UPC regulates development in Abu Dhabi now. And what that means is that every development application that comes forward has to go through the UPC for review and approval against compliance with Plan 2030. And this is one of the big safety checks in place that Plan 2030 is being complied with. This doesn't say there isn't an exemption at the leadership level, which is the prerogative of all governments, but this is the way it works for almost every application that has to comply with Plan 2030. And we have it, we do that through a simple four-step process with the developers. So moving from the economic side into the land use and the planning side, the Abu Dhabi Plan 2030 was, 2007 was a huge year in Abu Dhabi. Not only was Vision 2030 approved, UPC was formed. We actually produced the Plan 2030 in the same year, in 2007. And this is the guide map for the Emirates development, for the whole Emirate. It sets out a plan of sustainable planned growth. And again, I made the point earlier, that's not to say that's a population predictor. That's the template for the growth for the entire Emirate, and the market will mostly drive how fast that happens or not. The objectives, of course, were to respond to not just the current needs at the time. And again, Plan 2030 was in a very heady time. It was when there was a very high shine on real estate and development and investment, not just in the region, but most places globally. The second most important thing that it does, of course, is establishes a planning culture for Abu Dhabi, which really didn't exist before. It was more of a collection of processes that you had to follow to get to an end point, but those processes didn't align. They didn't often have a vision that you would get a feel for. And then, of course, the other important objective is to introduce clear guiding principles. So be very transparent about what types of developments are going to get approved and how they serve or comply with Plan 2030. The directions from Plan 2030, so the outcomes, we would sum up in these key categories. Sustainability is right at the top of the list. We needed to have a fundamental change in how development was being approached. We needed to celebrate Abu Dhabi's unique natural environment. Everybody who's been there knows that Abu Dhabi is actually a collection of islands, for the most part, anchored to a mainland point, which itself used to be intertidal and marine at points in ancient history. So Abu Dhabi's unique natural environment, we have mangroves that are very rare, and the aquatic life that goes along with that in the Gulf is quite unique. Now, just when I was leaving, they just discovered a prehistoric whale bone in the industrial area as they were excavating. So it has a long history of biodiversity. Heritage identity and opportunity is really critical, given the rapid amount of change that's been happening socially in Abu Dhabi in the last 30 to 40 years. And of course, the pursuit of excellence and livability for everything, and connectivity, which is the transportation side of it. So I'd mentioned that UBC is responsible for the development strategy and planning for the entire Emirate. I'll move from the west, which is Al Gharbia. That accounts for 40% of the Emirate's GDP. That's where in other words, that's where the oil fields are. And it's, again, mainly due to the oil and gas production. In the center, the burgundy is Abu Dhabi, and that, of course, includes the city of Abu Dhabi and is the Emirate's most important urban center and accounts for most of the economic diversification. So the oil comes from the west, the economic diversification comes from the center. The people, the governing family, mostly come from Al Ain, the eastern region, which borders with Oman and Saudi Arabia. And that includes the second largest city, the city of Al Ain as well, in the Emirate, and is also becoming more and more important as a tourist destination for the UAE. So those are the three areas. I'll just show you how the hierarchy of planning works. So we started in 2007 with Vision 2030, which was for the entire Emirate and a very high-level policy. We move into the Economic Vision 2030 and Plan 2030. So those are the two Emirate-wide plans that govern everything. From there, it's Geographic. We have the three regional plans. All three of those are now completed. The capital 2030 was the first one to be done. The second one, Al Ain, which was just very recent, and Al Gharbia is prepared but not finalized yet. And then, of course, each of those regions will have local plans, and I'll show you a little bit more about those in a second. That's where we drill down from the Emirate to the regional to the local level. This can get down to as fine a grain as 8 blocks in terms of detail. In Al Ain, just as by way of an example, to show you the hierarchy, we've just recently completed the Wasat Medina plan, the downtown city plan for Al Ain. In Al Gharbia, we started this is the third of the 3 that we've done. I'll get back to the capital in a moment, which is where we began. But Al Gharbia is where we are now, and we're working through a series of workshops and charrettes with the local stakeholders to produce settlement concept plans. And what that does, it looks at each of the population centers and going through the input of the local community. We're starting to set the framework pieces of a master plan for Al Gharbia for each of these settlements. There's, I think, 7 in process right now. If you go to Al Gharbia is desert, and desert that goes up against the ocean, and there isn't a lot of things connecting the settlements. In fact, some of those settlements have been there for a long, long time. And so this is a very, very new concept. And when we go out to the western region, to Al Gharbia, it's a very different kind of engagement with the local population. about growth and such. And I don't want you to think that this is all about growth. In fact, in the Al Ain plan, probably a very good portion of those concept plans actually locked growth and said these are the centers where there's no growth allowed. Others is where the growth was focused. So this isn't just about development expansion, it's also about protection of areas that just don't want to grow or don't need to grow. Capital 2030, again, is where we started. And I can't list them all, but I'll list the local plans that we've completed in the past 18 months or so. South Shamka, North Wafba, Sua Island. South Shamka and North Wafba, they're just names on a slide right now, probably to most of you. But South Shamka is probably 6 or 7 times the size of Manhattan. North Wafba is probably 10 times the size of Manhattan. So these are massive plans. We get used in the business to seeing plans always on PowerPoint slides, and they always look the same size. But these are plans that are in the 4,000 to 5,000 hectare range. Sua Island, Reem Island. Sua Island is about 25% complete. Reem Island is about 25% complete. Saadiyat Island, most of you are familiar with Saadiyat Island. I'll show you some images of Saadiyat Island. Lulu Island, which is an island that was created in the recent generation to block and protect the edge of the city. That's also got a master plan that we've prepared. Masdar City. You're all most of you familiar with Masdar City. So even Masdar City, which is a government initiative, still has to comply and come into terms with Plan 2030 through the Urban Planning Council. There's Yas Island, Zayed Sports City, Khalifa Port, and of course the Capital District, which wasn't in the last 18 months, that was actually in the last 24 to 30 months. So you can see that most of the work began in the Capital District. Each one of these master plans in North America, in my experience in Vancouver, would take 5 to 6 years to prepare one of those. And in the Abu Dhabi Urban Planning Council, we've produced that summary list of plans in the last 18 months. I'll just give you a bit of flash burn on some of these projects. South Shamka, you can see the size of it there relative to, that's the area there, and it looks like a sideways North American house. This is Abu Dhabi Island itself here, and that's how that compares in size. Again, these are all mixed use, full communities, so they will come with schools, mosques, retail centers, everything to make those communities fully contained or sustained. North Wafba is a very similar story. Also another massive project right here. You can see with the Abu Dhabi Island being centered here and the population being here for the last 30 years, that what's happening here is unprecedented, and the scale of it is unimaginable, really, when you're out there. Sua Island is one of the islands that's sandwiched. I'm sorry, I don't have a master image here. To this side is the main island of Abu Dhabi, and over here is Reem Island, and Sua sits in the middle of it. And really, a lot of the planning for Sua was begun before the Urban Planning Council was formed, and so we had to do as much as we could in Plan 2030 with Sua. But you can see that it's carrying a lot of transportation connections on the way to Reem Island. So Sua has been a challenge. But it's Cleveland Clinic has opened already for business, and that's a full service hospital. Reem Island, I mentioned, that's what Sua is in between Sua and the mainland is Reem Island, which is huge and is about again 25 to 30% complete already today. 3 years ago, when I came to Abu Dhabi, there was 1 or 2 cranes that I could see from the shoreline, and now a third of it is completed. Sorry, I just got that. The total GFA floor area is almost 20 million square meters, which is very large. Saadiyat Island, also another large island, 15 million square meters of development in the GFA in the plan, and it covers about 2,300 hectares, or 23 square kilometers. Sorry, everybody knows what's going to Saadiyat Island, right? All of these projects, there's been a lot of talk about projects being delayed and not proceeding. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the Crown Prince announced that almost all the projects on this list were proceeding and had been pre-authorized to proceed. So what's happening now is all of the developers and the authorities are working to reset the schedules for delivery of a lot of these projects that were paused for the last 12 to 18 months to determine the new phasing schedules. Saadiyat's in that position. The Capital District is also in that position. Lulu Island, that's the island that was created just off the coast. That also has a master plan. This one is less urgent. It's certainly serving its function now. Most of the people of the council and a lot of government would like to see that not be an urban form development and have it be more for the people and for nature. So this one is probably not going to move really fast. We're going to be pushing to have that be not. So this is the latest version of the plan, but we haven't approved it yet, so it's still in the review stage. Masdar is functioning today. I was just out there for a meeting last week. It got scaled down and focused on the first phase, which is built and functional now. And there's many different elements in Masdar. Have you had a presentation on Masdar? Masdar is set out to be basically a carbon-free city and a hub of research and a hub of education. So it has a MIST, which is the Masdar Institute of Science and Technology, producing I think the 3rd or 4th graduating class already, and it does foster a lot of research on site, wind, solar, and such. Very, very progressive. These are the details, but effectively phase 1 is the one that's gone forward. Masdar is cool because even in Abu Dhabi with the temperatures, for all but 2 months of the year, they've created an urban environment that's sensitive to the solar gain and harnesses the wind so that you can actually live outdoors for 10 months of the year at Masdar. And one of the cafes prides itself in doing that for 10 months of the year, outdoor seating. And that's with natural techniques, just paying attention to where the sun is and paying attention to how to harness the wind. Yas Island is fairly far along now. This is where the F1 race is. There's also the Ferrari World and concert venues. Yas, again, 3 years ago was none of that, and now Yas is probably 50 to 60% complete. This is just an example. Al Raha Beach, one of the developments, 12.8 million square meters of GFA, mostly residential, some mixed-use retail. The Zayed Sports City, Khalifa Port Industrial Zone, another big component that ties in with the rail project. And then I'll get to the Capital District next. We set out to have the Capital District be the leading sustainable Arab capital for Abu Dhabi. This is the second of 3 videos that I'd like to show you. So less slides on the Capital District and more video, but it's important because of the imagery, and you'll get the background for the policy as well. So the Capital District is close to my heart. That's my day job. I'm the director of that development and have been for the last 3 years. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the progress, but this is just a recap slide from the video. As I mentioned, there's a difference between population projection and plan capacity. So the plan capacity for the Capital District is 370,000 residents, and we had initially in 2007 targeted that for 2030. You can see the adjusted estimate now, which is 200,000 residents by 2030. But 5 years from now, of course, that could be different again, and it likely will be. But that sets the scale of the project. It's 4,500 hectares, or 45 square kilometers. So it's a very large development area. 1.5 million square meters will be the central business district, and the Emirati housing neighborhood, which is actually a third of the site geographically, will provide homes for 20,000 Emirati nationals. The housing program, which I'll tell you a little bit about for nationals, is based on detached villa-style homes on fairly large plots. Although the Urban Planning Council has been pushing down the size of those plots, there's still a limit. It ties into the social and the culture and the heritage values of the families, sometimes which can include actually 4 or 5 families with the children often staying home even after they get married and adding to the family. So from our Western standards, it sounds like low density, but really they end up moving 4 or 5, 6 families sometimes into one development plot. The Capital District will only work with rapid transit, will only work with metro. So with these densities and these populations, it's designed on the basis of an underground metro system, as you saw in the video, complemented by regional rail, light rail, and a bus system. The way we're approaching it now, of course, as population, it takes a while to mature. We'll probably start with bus rapid transit to begin with, and build the line and the ridership, and then we'll move to the rest. I just wanted to show you how the Capital District compares. How the Capital District compares in size to Abu Dhabi Island. So the 40-year-old Abu Dhabi is that island here, and the Capital District sits here. And that gives you a sense of the relative size of it. This is Yas Island, which I also talked to you about, and there's your island there, Saadiyat. It's cut off a little bit. In terms of the Vision 2030, the Capital District really is the heart of the vision. It's where the services and the centers are grouped. So when we're looking at an established island of Abu Dhabi, where all the population density and services have been clustered now for 3 or 4 decades, reseeding not just Abu Dhabi as a city, but the capital city of the UAE means that it has to create basically a twinning of the city and provide all of the sources of retail and economy and knowledge that you need to support the growing projects out here, many of which you saw on the list that I showed you for the master plans that are now completed and projects which are now funded and under construction. So these projects are spanning out here. This is 45 square kilometers, about 11 kilometers in this direction. So you can get a sense of the potential for sprawl if we didn't have Plan 2030 in place. It was going to be likely all housing projects that wouldn't have been master planned in. So really, Capital District has 2 roles. Provide the new capital city for the UAE, but also to provide a new growth center for the outlying lower density neighborhoods. In terms of construction progress, I wanted to give you an update on the Capital District. This is one of the projects that His Highness Sheikh Mohammed affirmed for going forward, at least in phases. Abu Dhabi University has been open for 2 years now. Zayed University opened this past summer, and we've got our first development site opened as well. So the Capital District is moving forward, certainly. Moving away from the Capital District and back to the island I've been pointing to all night. This is the north end of the Abu Dhabi island, the most established area. This is our corniche, or our waterfront along here. And this is where the fort of Abu Dhabi, Al Hosn, Qasr Al Hosn, was sited around the well that was discovered there. And that historic fort sits here, and then of course the population began to grow around the fort. And that wasn't very long ago. That's in the last 100 years, 150 years. But the development of the city is, of course, in the last 30 to 40 years. When we're looking at revitalization, again, a lot of most of Abu Dhabi was built without a planning council in place. So we have to go and reestablish the urban planning framework in a lot of the older areas. We're doing that through district-wide framework plans, sector-wide, so getting more focused and getting down to the street level in some cases. There isn't a very good interconnected street grid, and some of the streets are too wide for the purposes that they need to serve. So we're resetting all of that in our revitalization plans. The key components are, again, from Plan 2030, connectivity, parking, I'll talk about that in a second, public realm improvements, certainly sidewalks, shade, and park space, and then community facilities within walking distance to the population that's already down there. These things don't exist in a really good balance yet in Abu Dhabi, the old island, so we're rebalancing the city. And we've been acquiring properties for the last 6 months to serve all 4 of these purposes. Parking in Abu Dhabi is a problem, and the main reason that it shouldn't be a problem with this population, but the main reason it's a problem is because the developers were permitted to develop those buildings, most of them without underground parking. And it really is pointillism development. You'll see it. It really makes you appreciate a city like New York, where, notwithstanding the years and years it takes to get an approval, one of the things it gives you is an integrated management system of what the developer's interests are, which is primarily profit, and what the community's interests are, which is primarily a balanced community. And so by building a city in points, you don't get that balance. That no one collectively is just on their own going to look after the city. So the Planning Council is working on short-term solutions, which are to provide parking on the surface, but also have introduced the new building code, which would require parking underground to be provided. That's not as easy as it sounds, because a lot of the footprints for the buildings that were approved are too small for underground parking. So they need to share parking plinths or underneath the parking podiums. There's a cultural issue with that, and that the building has to be sitting on sand to have the most value to me. And so sharing a underground parking plinth takes away my perception of value. And so I'm not so inclined to want to participate in a shared parking garage, which is very common in New York and Vancouver and other major cities. So there's things to overcome as we work through that. The master plan that we're starting with is 8 blocks. These are 8 Abu Dhabi blocks. Some of our blocks can be 1 kilometer long, so it's a very large area. This is also one of my favorite projects. When I came to Abu Dhabi, this is the corniche that runs along the length here. That's the waterfront, and it had been revitalized a number of times in recent history. When I got there, it was hard edge, overlooking very shallow water, and the people weren't really coming down there. There was, as you can see, there's a major road here. So we came up with a 3-phase plan to really get the corniche working. Phase 1 was completed, and that's what it looks like today. You can see we've reintroduced the natural beaches that were taken away for the road, unfortunately, in the 80s. These beaches now are the most popular places to go in Abu Dhabi, not just for non-locals, but for locals. We created family beaches, which are private, just for people with families. And each beach is designed for a different purpose, and it's working really well because we put retail and other things with it. This is the vision is to take it to the next level, which is phase 2, and this is one of our ongoing revitalization plans. Martha Schwartz was brought in, and she prepared this new master plan for the Corniche area. It includes expansion of the beaches again, putting the Abu Dhabi sand back in the water and recreating the beaches that were taken away for a hard urban edge not too long ago. That's just a couple of images of what it will look like. Neighborhood planning, I'm just going to move through this, but one of our big focuses is to make sure that communities are planned and not just points on a map. So a lot of our work we spend with developers and with local builders. The model for development in Abu Dhabi in the single family areas traditionally has been my family has a plot and I build my villa on that plot. So I don't relate very well to planning departments and others, and I haven't been doing this my whole life. This is my first time to build a villa. So I hire a local company and I have the villa built. So we've had to really introduce some building block concepts around how a community can develop, even with each plot being built by a different family. We're having a very high degree of success because the communities that are now maturing, I say maturing, but in the last 3 years, they're having very good, many of them are having a good balance to them. And when the balance isn't there, we really hear about it. We have a neighborhood that was done just before the Urban Planning Council, where community facilities and retail centers were not well thought out ahead of time, and those neighborhoods aren't working out so well because the people have to drive just to get milk and eggs, and whereas the other neighborhoods that we've master planned, people can walk at night to go get those things. The design principles are connectivity, walkable neighborhoods, a strong architectural context. There's some very, very specific needs in the culture for how a home is designed, and those have to be really incorporated. That relates mostly to privacy and the relationship in the family unit between the males and the females, and how visitors are received and such. And so the design for these homes is critical. Designing a home for an expat family is a very different home than for a national family. So we capture a lot of that in an approach I think that we brought in from Vancouver, which is design charrettes. And this is where we have a series of exploratory workshops with all the stakeholders and the authorities, as well as the individuals, come in and actually go through almost planning style workshops and give feedback to us. We also did something new last year, which is to survey the community. This is not something that had been done before in Abu Dhabi, and so we prepared a survey about community facilities and what people would like and what they have, what they like, and what they want to have. It was really interesting to leadership when we reported back and showed that 63% of the people surveyed, and it was a large sample size, over 10,000 households, were not happy with the level of community services and facilities in their neighborhoods. So this gave us a very strong tool to beef up our requirements for community facilities in these neighborhoods. I'd like to talk to you about the guidelines. This is the policy setting. This is what's guiding it. So the Abu Dhabi Urban Planning Council sits as a member of in the family of government, but the other agencies all carry their own authorities. The environmental authority, the Department of Transport is very strong, the municipalities are very strong. But what the Urban Planning Council can do is produce policies that are guidelines that are approved by the leadership of Abu Dhabi as government, and then all of the agencies have to comply with these. So this is the second way of, we centralized planning authority under the council, but then the planning council uses that authority to produce policies that can then get mandated across the other departments. And so our influence is much larger than the 200 people who work in the council. Our influence is actually all of the policies, and it's quite profound really in Abu Dhabi now, because the first thing we produced was a public realm design manual, which didn't exist before. So when you go there for the first time, you'll find the sidewalks, the connectivity, the accessibility very poor in some areas. So the public realm design manual addresses this: street furniture, amenities, shading, how the sidewalks are to be produced and designed. Another big initiative is the Urban Street Design Manual, and this was starting to have an influence over, a strong influence over how streets are designed. Most of you will know streets and transportation and land use are linked very importantly in most cities. They hadn't been so much in Abu Dhabi, and so the transportation was pretty much done for its own merits and not related to the land use. So the street design manual does important things like identify the hierarchy of streets, narrow streets where they don't need to be large, helps the other agencies understand the role of a street before designing it. Utility corridors, location and design manual. That sounds really boring, but it's one of the most important things that we've done. In Abu Dhabi, some of our streets can be 280 meters wide, 3 feet. It's huge, and part of that is because the utilities insist that their utilities can't go under the roads, the paved portion of the roads. And the DOT supports that, saying we don't want your pipes under there. So most of the utility carrying streets have massive medians in the middle. I mean massive, and some of them are 80, 100 meters wide. And then combined with that are the traveled lanes on each side. So when we looked at the utility corridor location and design manual, you can see that we've been pushing utilities back under the street again. And this is allowing us to bring the buildings and the human beings closer together, getting shade back from those buildings, and getting away from what our planners call the frying pan effect, which is creating these giant linear frying pans through the city. So we're having some degree of success with that, but it's still a challenge. There's no power anywhere near there. And this can happen for sometimes 2 years, 3 years with no permanent power. And this was costing the developers money, and so they were happy to work with us to project and work with the utility providers in synchronizing these plans. The sewer authority had its own plan, the water authority had its own plan, the power authority had its own plan, and none of them related to each other. And so we found places that were rich with water, and others that are rich with power, and almost none that were rich with water and power. And so there was very interesting challenges. So that's also a pretty important piece of the policy work that we did. In the Emirati housing program, it's the second big part of my portfolio, and that's to manage the production of turnkey homes for Emirati families. There's a high demand for family homes. There's been so much coming together into the urban centers, and the government has a policy of giving a plot for a new home to each new family upon marriage, and so you can imagine with the youthfulness of the population in the UAE, how many plots are required to fuel that, and that's what drives all of those large neighborhood approvals that I showed you. North Wapa, South Shamka, even the capital district Emirati neighborhood is driven by the program and the policy to give homes to families. So in 3 years, we'll be delivering projects where all those solid dots are. So you can see that we're in the capital area, the Al Ain area, clustering around Al Ain city. We're also out in the western region as well with the project. And this is, again, delivering through the local developers. We put tender calls out, and the developer will then work for the Urban Planning Council. We're the financier as well as the owner, so they will produce and deliver those for us. That's the breakdown by region, 12,518 units that we will deliver across the Emirate. This program isn't very old. It wasn't in my original portfolio, so I started the Emirati housing program about 20 months ago. We delivered the first 488 villas turnkey and completed to the first families in the summer of last year. And we have another 1,300 coming early this year. The Al Falah project and a smaller one called the Watani project. But in total, we'll deliver 12,000 within the next 36 months, 12,000 finished villas, with about 5,000 of those being this year when we get all the way to the end of the year. So it's a massive program. It's an interesting role for the Urban Planning Council to be providing the homes for families. It's really an implementation role, but again, filling the need in government and also making sure that the master plans are manifesting. They've come to us. We'll likely look at transitioning these projects back to a different agency now that we've got them set up and started, but we've really catalyzed the program. Prior to the Urban Planning Council starting this, we had a housing center, but they weren't very successful at delivering the housing, so this is where we are now. The other advantage that we get of managing the program is that we've really introduced sustainability. The first projects that started weren't done. The Estidama program, which I'm about to tell you about, hadn't even been adopted yet. But now all the projects come in at a minimum Pearl 2 level, which I'll describe. And we're also building 2 Pearl 3 demonstration villas as part of those homes in the western region and also in Abu Dhabi. This is huge in the local population because this is a very different way of building villas, a different way of looking at villas and how they're designed and built. So they don't, to us, they look huge and very traditional from the outside, but these homes are actually just with the solar orientation, the way that we've managed the windows, the placement, and such, we're getting extremely high levels of sustainability on those villas now. Estidama, this is the last part of my presentation for you tonight. Save the best for last. This is Abu Dhabi's unique sustainability program, and it's based on, we studied other programs, LEED, BREEAM in Europe, and Estidama is the one that's self-developed around Abu Dhabi. So it's sensitive to the climate, sensitive to the culture, it's sensitive to the heritage, and it goes further than the other programs in that the 5th Pearl of certification is a regenerative impact on Earth, which means that it's not neutral. It actually regenerates. So it's tasked with harvesting more energy than it uses. We have one that just passed the Pearl 5 design certification, the Al Ain Desert Center. Just got the Pearl 5 certification on its design, which is really remarkable. The 4 pillars of sustainability, you're probably familiar with these: economic, environmental, social, and cultural. And how they manifest from our perspective is, what it means by economic is it's got to reduce costs, it's got to save money or it won't be sustainable. That's an important point in Abu Dhabi, I think in a lot of places in the world, because the tendency is to do things the way I always did them until I get to the end, and then I start to buy green, bolt-on green. I better go out and buy the solar panels, I better buy that really expensive heating system that doesn't use as much power. But the problem with that approach is it costs you a lot more money. So we say that sustainability has to save you money or you're not doing it right. You're not fundamentally rethinking how a building functions and how it relates to the community and the ground that it sits on. Environmental, it has to do all these things: reduce energy, water, and waste. Social, it has to improve the quality of life. This one's an important point, and most people, it's all about perceptions. You sit in a villa with the air conditioning blasting, feeling the cold air, thinking this is good. I've got a good house. I can feel the cold air blowing. But the reason it's blasting is because it's going out the windows and out the doors and such. And we've slowly been convincing people that a better quality of life is air that's not blasting in your face at ice cold temperatures and leaving behind at desert temperatures, and that your home can function more as an ecosystem where it's much more in balance and you don't have these energy flows crossing both literal and figurative in your life. And so we're having a lot of success with that element, and also preserving heritage and values. We found that when we looked at it, a lot of the homes from 200 years ago were much better designed than the homes from 30 years ago. And so we're going back to, when we find those traditional values, people still relate to them. And this has allowed us to really leverage up our program and going back to some of the original principles. I've already talked about the Pearl rating system. These are all the elements. I won't go through them, but it's very similar to the North American and the European systems and how it measures how a system will perform. And it's based on gathering points through the design phase, the construction phase, and the operation phase. So it can't just look pretty on the drawing, it has to actually get built properly with the right materials sourced locally, and then it has to operate properly. So when you get your home, you can't just take out the HVAC system and replace it with the one you've always used for your other villas. You have to stay true to the design, or you don't get your rating. And these are the three phases: design, construction, and operational. At each phase, you have to get certified to pass through the program. We think of the Estidama program as about empowering communities, promoting the development of sustainable communities, which will again improve the quality of life. We provide and undertake our own training of qualified professionals. So architects and developers and project managers come in and get training, and once they're PQP certified, they can start to seal drawings that they comply with the government's policies and practices. And we've been doing the same for our colleagues in the other departments, sending them through the training, and so we're starting to really get a lot of traction with the general knowledge. We also conduct campaigns and public consultations and training programs as well outside of the PQP course. Very quickly, I'd like to talk about the Capital District. These are just a few of the closing thoughts. In the Capital District, we fundamentally changed the way development was approached. And we had that luxury because we were doing it from within the Urban Planning Council. So we re-examined the existing planning practices and the infrastructure practices only from a framework of sustainability. So how would we make the most sustainable city from scratch, which we had the opportunity to do. So what we did was we started with cost, and we looked at the cost impact of current practices and looked to lower the cost. That's the life cycle cost, so that's not just looking at the capital cost or the operating cost, but the full picture. Also the cost to provide utilities was never included. The developers always have the luxury of looking at just the parcel they have, but they don't worry about what it costs to get power up there or water. So we changed that model and looked at the whole picture. In summary, just by approaching things differently, we've had huge changes. We've narrowed the local streets by 33% from what the Abu Dhabi standard is. And that's just a percent number, it doesn't mean a lot. In the Capital District, it means 140 hectares of land was liberated from pipes and streets for cars to homes for people. 140 hectares. Just one simple design change that I got approved in about 45 days created 140 hectares for homes. And that's just narrowing the rights of ways for the utilities and also the roads for the cars. The other huge thing in Abu Dhabi is design demands. These are companies, this is the Power Authority, which its mandate is to not ever allow a brownout or a blackout. So they have a high factor of safety when they deliver power to their neighborhood. They'll assume that everybody has the AC on, all the blenders on, all the lights on, everything is on, and then they'll typically double it. Okay, that's the factor of safety. So those thumping big transformers and power stations, they plug in way more power than is needed. It's the government that pays the price for that, not the developers, and so the developers also get in on it and will leverage up the population projections and GFA projections. And so this was a huge driver for hundreds of millions of dollars of money going into power plants and distribution lines. We worked with the authorities to bring demand designs numbers down. And the way that we could do that was because we said, we're the Urban Planning Council, we're the controllers of Plan 2030. Well, we can tell you that that is going to be a 6-story building and not a 40-story building. You don't have to have the factor of safety that you used to have in the 70s. And we had a very high degree of success with that model, and we were able to bring those demands down. We also changed the way utilities look at operating costs, and we, if you can believe it, the standard design was to put utilities on both sides of a local street. So water and power on this side, if it's the street out in front of us, and water and power mains on the other side. And that was again to avoid cutting the pavement with cross connection. And so we were able to have huge savings on just changing that design element. We also optimized the public realm. That doesn't sound very sexy either. This is where all the money is here, and all of the savings right there in the public realm design. I'll show you what I mean by that. We've got better placed public realm. If you look carefully at this street, you'll see all the trees missing from here. The current standard, of course, is to line both sides with streets and have a median down the center, which is also lined with trees. And in Abu Dhabi, where it rains 8 or 9 hours a year, that's a huge amount of water that has to come. And the water comes from treated sewage effluent. It has a very high carbon footprint to produce irrigation water. And this simple change alone, which is narrowing the street, getting rid of the median, which was also grassed, usually with North American grass, which is very high water usage. We had massive savings on the water reduction. This is also sensibly landscaped street, and you can see the amount of hardscaping versus what would be grass today from curb to curb. This park, the planners don't like me to put this slide up because they say I underestimate the water savings when I do this. This park here, which looks pretty green, and the people have ranked much higher than the traditional parks that have been provided, uses 25% of the water of the earlier parks. Not 25% less, but less than 25% of the irrigation water. And these parks are the most popular in the city that we've been building. And so we broke the idea that to have a good park, you needed to have recreate a lush kind of rainforest western feel, and have had a huge degree of success. These numbers are, I'm being conservative, but in the streetscape alone, the Abu Dhabi average is 6 to 8, up to 10 liters a day of water per square meter goes into watering. We've reduced that in the capital district to 1.5 liters. And on the public realm, which I just talked about, 10 to 12 liters per square meter a day. And we've got that down to 3 liters. The savings that I was talking about revisiting how a city is designed from the ground up, these are capital savings alone, and each one of these comes with an operating savings as well, which we haven't been able to quantify with the authorities yet. But on power, we've saved the authority on the capital district over 10% of its capital costs, and this is an authority that spends money by the hundreds of millions. And so these are very big numbers. Potable water, 20% reduction in capital. Sewer, 4.2%. Irrigation, almost 10%. And public realm, look at that capital cost reduction by taking a sustainable approach. 70% less. What they were doing for a US dollar a year ago, they can produce a better outcome for the users at 30 cents. And so this is what we've been driving with sustainability on our capital district program. The benefit of that is that we did that in conjunction with all the authorities of the government. So now everybody's on board with that. And so when we're seeing new developments come in that don't do that, even though it's not mandatory, the authorities are pushing them back and saying, you know, Jody said we don't have to spend that much on power. Can you do it that way? And it's making a big difference. Yes.
When you were talking about the Emirati housing project, I assume it's only for the Emirati nationals, like the area only they will be living. Do you think it's necessary to separate them from the rest of the population in order to preserve the culture and the values?
That's an excellent question. Did everyone hear the question? Yeah. The Emirati housing program is again just one part of the government program, one part of the way the society is structured, in that the homes are provided upon marriage. These are the new arrivals, but to homes. These are people who haven't had homes before. In my building where I live in a 3-story apartment flat right in Abu Dhabi, just on a regular street, and more than half of the people in those flats are Emirati families. So it's changing rapidly right now, that, and many of the young people are choosing to stay in apartment flats. And so what we're doing is, I didn't have a chance to show you everything tonight. One of the things that we're working on, the traditional way of living is the Frege style, and that's where the homes are really connected through paths between, that they can walk between the homes. We've worked on a vertical Frege, which is going to the same principles, but putting them into a vertical or apartment flat. So notwithstanding that program, what you find after a number of years is that many of the, not specifically this program, but many of the people who set out to build villas and live with their families, they're actually rented out now to other families, sometimes national, many times expatriate families. And so we do see a very good mixing of the populations. These neighborhoods are starting, though, you're absolutely right, 100% nationals, and there's restrictions on them by government for getting these homes about being able to sell them or even rent them out afterwards. And so this is filling a certain niche, but even with 12,500 homes, that's just touching the demand right now. So I think my building is typical, where a good portion of it is also Emirati families mixed in with expats. Yes.
So you think the bringing the center now to the capital district to the outskirts of the current center is going to affect the demographics of Abu Dhabi now? Especially that somehow it's, to me, it's a reverse expansion where usually cities expand outwards, but now when you bring that center, it's going to expand inwards to fill up all of these proposals.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we put focus now, before it's needed, on revitalizing the existing downtown. In fact, what we're doing is would be counterintuitive probably to New Yorkers, and that is that we're knocking density out of the downtown right now to bring that down. It got to a really untenable level for a city that was built without rapid transit. And so the transition is to knock some of that density out, increase the connectivity, increase parking, increase local amenities, while providing a twin center for the city. It, again, as I mentioned in my presentation, it only works on a spine of high-speed metro. That plan will not work without metro. It has to have an underground high-speed line to make that work. And we can do it on bus rapid transit for a while, but when the population nodes start to densify in the capital district, they'll also densify on the nodes in the existing area as well, which is what we're making room for. So we're in a transition right now. The transition is complicated by the world economy. And in 2007, when the plan was developed, 2008 happened to the US, then 2009 happened to the rest of the world, and 2010 and 11 have been happening to Abu Dhabi, but at a much lower degree because of the involvement of government in the real estate sector and the connection, which is really working to its advantage. The conservative approach in the past to avoid some of the pitfalls of development, which isn't based on fundamentals, or at least supported with cash flow. So but it's complicated. The plan for the capital district, not the plan, but the phasing of the plan for the capital district. And so we've really, as you saw, we're focusing on the Emirati neighborhood, 20,000 residents. We can handle that with the car and light bus service. So the dense spines and the central hub, we're doing the design right now, the infrastructure design, but we're not planning on proceeding until the government's ready to handle that. And at the council, when we're looking at the population projections and the density and what's happening in the economy, we're not advising right now that we go ahead with those capital district spines. With all the other, Reem Island, Suwa Island, Saadiyat Island, Yas Island, going ahead, those are all mixed-use centers. Reem has a central business district on it. Suwa has a small central business district on it. So now we're going to let those stabilize before I think the government would be looking at moving forward. Yes.
What kind of designs or considerations have you been looking at to make the metro appealing to Emiratis? Because using the metro in Abu Dhabi now, I like very rarely see locals using the metro. So I'm just wondering, like, since it's going to be so important for the flow of the city, what sort of considerations are being looked at for that?
That's an excellent question. There's 2 or 3 big factors right now where you're not seeing the diversity in ridership. The biggest one is there's not enough buses. And then the first people that are willing to pack on the buses are the laborers because it's still cost effective for them, right? So they'll sacrifice quality of life experience to get on that bus.
Yeah, it costs 30 cents.
Yeah. But an expat won't often get on the buses right now because they're just too crowded. So the first thing that is happening is we're getting more bus lines on there. That'll thin it down. In the evenings, actually, next time you're there, do watch the buses really late at night. You do see a lot of dish dashes on the buses much later in the evening when the laborers have gone home or gone back to their accommodations. You'll see that change a little bit. The other factor, of course, is proximity, walking distance to the bus stops. That's the second big one, right? You have to walk. If you have to walk very far in 50 degrees Celsius weather, again, the people most likely to do that are the laborers because they'll sacrifice the quality of that walk in order to get on the bus, in order to get home. Whereas the people that don't have to sacrifice that quality, they can get in their air-conditioned cars, right? So that's the second big reason. And then the third system is that the system is just not in place. It's not an interconnected grid, and so you can't really use it like you can in the New York subway, which is, you can really function here really well without a car. In fact, better than you can if you have a car, which is really like an anchor. Those are the 3 main factors for not seeing it. But I'm hopeful, and I think everybody's very hopeful, that with more buses, better lines, more integrated, that the municipality, at our encouragement, has been providing more stops for the buses and actually air-conditioned stops, which it sounds like a luxury here, but 50 Celsius is really hot, and you can't stand outside with children. Even the government shuts down at 49 Celsius, but so it's something to consider. So buses have a logistic challenge that they don't have in the Western world, which is that high temperature around it, which speaks to getting a more refined system in place. Another part of the question, I think, was around metro and rapid transit, and it's a really good thing to consider. And I've asked a lot of my national friends this. Abu Dhabi's got an underground line plan, but Dubai built an above ground line, and people really like it in Dubai, and they've added more stops recently. But the question is, will people get on an underground line which goes underneath? This is a culture and a people who have had line of sight for hundreds of miles for centuries, and it'd be interesting to see sociologically whether they're ready to, people are ready to get underground or not. So we're not sure about that yet. We get a lot of, in some areas, resistance to the underground line, and so we're looking into that more. Yes.
I was curious, in what ways has, or like through what means, has, your council or the government pushed to kind of educate the local population, local citizens about this and kind of promote their goal, so as to kind of internalize this vision of sustainability for the next 20 or so years, so as to make the transition, make this development as smooth as possible. Has there been anything that you guys have done?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have. We didn't at first. We didn't do enough at first, and so we actually, the first resistance points to the Estidama program actually came from within government at the line level. The people that were receiving the building applications and such, just there wasn't a good connection with the Estidama program. And then once that happened, then the local developers and architects, also not trained in that, began to resist. And very quickly, it started to get quite feeling that there was a lot of resistance. So the UPC did 2 things right away. Backed off the mandatory element for 6 to 9 months, and went back out with education and training for 6 to 9 months, and it's made a huge difference. And we've now just brought the mandatory element back in, and we're not having So it was moving a little bit too fast. But it's not just the local population. A lot of the consulting firms, architects or GCC, or broader. Unfortunately, we had resistance from American firms and British firms as well. So it's really about what you can get away with and what you're used to doing, and less about where you're from. I think it was really about an industry that wasn't self-checking on sustainability until we gave them, just like you said, gave them the tools to